It's 2025. Josh Allen's your reigning league MVP. James Cook is averaging over 100 yards rushing per game. The Bills' pass rush has shown flashes, but one thing remains from years past. This team has major issues trying to defend the run. Only the Giants and Bengals have allowed higher expected points per rush average than Buffalo, as they're tied for a league high 5.5 yards per carry, and only the one-win Titans have allowed one more touchdown on the ground than their 14 so far. I want to go through the season, how opponents have challenged the run fits, overpowered some of the smaller personnel, and what's really killed them in that regard, leading up to this past week when the Dolphins rode that facet to an upset win in Miami as 9.5-point underdogs. Let's start in week 1 when a huge forced fumble on Derrick Henry helped spark the miraculous 15-point comeback in the fourth quarter, but the King averaged nearly 10 yards per carry, and the Ravens crushed them for 238 yards on the ground. This will lead to a larger point on opposing offenses using bigger personnel groupings against the defense that wants to stick in the nickel sets as much as they can, but this is generally how Baltimore likes to operate, and also made sense in this matchup considering they were in control for about the first 55 minutes of the night. This first one is actually out of 11 personnel, meaning only one tight end on the field, who they'll run trap towards and ends up breaking for 17 yards. Bills have the classic 31 alignment by the D tackles towards the strong side, meaning this guy is in a free technique on the outside shade of the guard, and on the backside you have a shade nose to the shoulder of the center. And because the nickel is pretty far inside, those linebackers are also shifted strong as well. Yet what the Titans movement does here is create a little bit of hesitation, as the Ravens allow his free technique to get up the field since they want to trap him. They block back with both the guards, and it allows the center and the left tackle to climb to the second level. The Mike backer Terrell Bernard may get a piece of Henry, but not close enough since he's initially moving the other way, and Henry can get rolling downhill for a big gain. Next we've got a little QB keep for a 10-yard touchdown, again just one tight end on the field, as they bring Zay Flowers on jet motion as if they used him as an extra blocker for an inside zone handoff, but they also bring the tight end across the opposite way at the snap as the D-end crashes inside, and Lar keeps for a walk-in score. Watching from the end zone angle as they initially swap over the running back's alignment, then comes the motion, and the ball is snapped just before Zay reaches the back. There's already traffic in the backfield, as you can probably see with all this action that I've drawn up here, but now as the O-line blocks zone to the defense's left, you have Mark Andrews sneaking across, tackle steps away from the end, and as Joey Bosa comes flat here, you'll see Ronnie Stanley at left tackle, either for him to recognize, or that's what he's taught, match the linebacker's movement, bumping out with the tight end. Those two wash him and the nickel out of the way. Lamar does a nice job of pressing the outside in order to cut up behind him, and he scores untouched. Now let's beef up a little bit. Extra tight end on the field, who functions as a fullback in I formation, since Baltimore didn't have Patrick Ricard at that point of the season, and they'll run lead toss to the right, where again, Henry just has to break that tackle by the safety to score from 30 yards out, which he's going to win that battle more often than not. You see that Buffalo actually puts an extra linebacker on the field in this case, but for some reason they shift that D-line weak in this situation and creates a bubble with an open B gap towards the strong side. So the D-end here is more firm with controlling that space rather than fighting for the outside shoulder to keep it contained as the tight end pins him inside. Right tackle flies out to the second level and peels back on the mic. Center reach blocks the one technique with a little help from his guard, who'll take the will. Fullback fits up on number 42 out here. And what this does as we let this roll now, number 58 Matt Milano, already committing his shoulders from the backside, badly overruns this because he knows they're caught in a bad spot. And we have a highway for the King, who stiff arms the safety number 24 to the ground, who is also a little late, and he scores. Which he also does the very next time he touches the ball, only from 48 yards out this time. We're in 13 or 22 personnel, depending on how you want to count this fill and fullback, and they'll run a simple inside zone to the left. Bills heavily overplay that, and leave a nice cutback lane for Henry this time, before on this occasion, it's the other safety Taylor Rapp number 9, caught in a bad spot, and outraces him up the sideline. Very simple play design, but what I want you to check out here is this entire left side, including this head up 2 technique over the guard, trying to protect the outside shoulder, which allows the center to peel back for the mic. Number 47, the corner, you'll see in a second as well. He's playing heavy outside, and Rapp is forced actually to bail out since he's responsible for the deep post if they were in coverage, which as we let this run here, leaves him with his hips pointed the wrong way, and then he's a couple of steps late once he actually reacts to what's happening. Poor discipline, based on some of the ways they've been beaten earlier, not being able to own your space, and then just major issues with the safeties either being late altogether based on the rotations at the snap, or just flat out taking poor angles. Let's go to week 2 at the New York Jets, which was quite a different story due to how drastically dissimilar the game script looked like for the Bills, going up 20-0 after 4 drives on each side, which one for the Jets was quickly wiped up by Justin Fields' fumble, another by a failed reverse for a huge loss, and then the others each involved a nice TFL for Buffalo, which is where they excel, as this defensive line is built to penetrate, create quick run stuffs, and force opponents into 3rd and long. That's what the numbers bared out last year as well, which is why they had their most successful season against the run in a while, but they also surrendered plenty of explosives on the ground. Here are 2 promising plays for the Jets early on. This first one is almost like another elite inside zone out of 22 personnel, although I personally would actually label it a traditional ISO run. Only here the Jets use 6 offensive linemen as the de facto tight end. They motion the actual Y across from a balanced look and run behind him for a nice 12-yard chunk. As you'll see here, the Jets don't mind that extra linebacker being on the field, because the Bills stick in the original lineman towards the strong side from the defensive line, with the linebackers moving about half a head over with that motion, tight end left tackle combo up to number 42, left guard and center up to 58, and Jose Haiga number 8 Terrell Bernard is to meet the fullback in the hole here. He gets dug out, and Breece Hall has a head of steam into contact with the deep safety. Nice run. Soon after, New York is in 21 pony personnel, meaning 2 actual tailbacks on the field at the same time, and they'll move the other back, Braylon Allen, in for a split backfield with Justin Fields. This is out of the Ravens playbook from the week prior, with a slight wrinkle, as they actually pull the right tackle to deceive the defense, and that extra back sifts across to become the lead blocker for his quarterback. And it works out nicely, as you can see the entire defense kind of being frozen, and we'll watch it again from the end zone here in a second. So again, they bring Allen in to create that split backfield look. I'd call this T lead, as they blocked on everyone with a couple of double teams inside, and another isolation block against anyone trying to fill that B gap against the tackle, which in this case is a defensive back, so I'd actually like to see what would have happened if this was handed off. This safety is going to come down here, and he's going to get pinned inside by his wide receiver into the boundary in a condensed split, and even though theoretically there now are 8 bodies in the box, it's a nickel fill-in against the lead block, that safety's being cracked back on, and the linebackers seem to be frozen in place. As Fields keeps the ball against the D-end, sort of sitting there trying to diagnose himself, and they get an easy 11 yards out to the sideline. In the first matchup with the Dolphins, those guys ran the ball fairly well, although they never quite broke through, and this was a 1-possession game prior to a bad Tua pick in the red zone with about 3 minutes left. One nice run Miami did have, and it was a foreshadowing of how they might approach their rematch, as they take a page out of the Bills' offensive playbook when they start out in the full house backfield with a fullback and tight end offset to either side of the quarterback, but they move both of those up into offset alignments to either side of the line, and they'll change up the look once more, putting Alec Ingold in motion just before the snap to run leads in the zone towards him, yet Achane finds a nice cutback lane to rip off 14 yards. You can see Buffalo actually matches with base personnel here, and they put safety Cole Bishop into the box, while having the D tackles in the 3 and the 2 alignment head up on the guard. And off the little motion with Ingold, they'll be running leads inside zone to the defense's right. The backside tight end does a nice job of leading with his inside foot and making sure that the end doesn't crash through the C gap. But then I want you to watch those 2 D tackles inside, having to work against those combo blocks, as they sort of get washed down here, and how it affects the linebackers behind it, committing their shoulders early and running themselves out of the play, as Achane will cut back off his right tackle, and you'll see Bishop actually bail out of this 8-man box, while Terrell Bernard gives a little push call to the 3rd linebacker Shaq Thompson, who now ends up also playing contain, while those other 2 guys on the 2nd level bump over a little bit, making them have to be even more aggressive with trailing the action, and now Achane knives through untouched until those 2 deep safeties converge on him at the end of a 14-yard gain. Week 4, the Saints had a solid day on the ground, with a goal interception turning momentum in Buffalo's favor just before the end of a tightly fought first half, although some of those were more based around being spread out to create soft box counts and screens that officially counted as runs. Here's one carry by Kendry Miller, where they actually are in 12 personnel, with both tight ends to the offense's left as part of this tight bunch. Saints kinda cheat with both of them as to create a shorter track for them, but what ultimately becomes what I'd label YF counter, so something that you don't see every day, as those two guys will be responsible for the kick out on the D end and the wraparound from the backside to lead up into the hole. They get really good initial push to move the line of scrimmage, but more importantly, they can quickly cover up those bodies on the second level, and Miller goes into the end zone from 18 yards out after breaking a couple of tackles. Check out what's happening inside here, because they really catch the Bills in a bad spot. Number 24 is down at the line of scrimmage, when the D-end is pretty wide already, and I guess he's supposed to stunt inside, as he also has this 2-eye to crash across the face of the center, yet as the right tackle gets a piece of the end on his path to the playside backer, and the tight end adjusts to the blitzing safety, number 88 will take care of the D-end as he's trying to lead up through the hole. The right guard and center take advantage of the momentum of the D-tackle and wash him down, along with two solid down blocks on the backside, and all of a sudden the running back sees this nickel trying to fill from the backside, jukes around him, safety dives for the ankles, so Miller regains his balance twice and gets into the paint. Even the Patriots, who despite coming off a Trevion Henderson explosion last week against the Bucs, still are basically tied for the second worst rush EPA in the league, were able to find some success against this unit. Their approach revolved more around using big bodies, and also the tendency for the Bills to aggressively let the fullback lead them to the ball. They did so with a couple of toss plays, away from how they made it look like they were asking the guys to fit up on. First you have Henderson as the deep back in his I formation, with a tight end to either end of the line, plus the one wide out to the top of the screen. You see quarterback Drake May open up to the offense's right side, as if he was handing the ball for some kind of lead play, but then he actually pitches it the opposite way. The rookie slips from arm tackle and gains a quick 13 yards. Watch it from the defensive perspective, as the Pats pull the left guard, who along with the fullback act as if they're opening a hole to the left. The center somehow gets a piece of this D-end, crossing number 72's face. Right tackle glides up to shield the linebacker inside, once that guy recognizes where the ball is actually going, and Hunter Henry rides number 24 out to the sideline, and now you have a D-end basically having to protect the corner against the guy with 4-3 speed, just not enough. And the second one to Ramondre Stevenson is even better, as he goes completely untouched for a 7-yard score. Exact same play design, only this time they let the D-end shoot upfield, meaning the center is actually now looking for somebody to block since nobody's home. He ultimately progresses to the safety, who would otherwise get trucked by Stevenson at the goal line. Check out how those linebackers completely run themselves out of the picture. Number 45 is not even on the damn screen anymore as we let this run, because of how he gets widened, probably just not trying to surrender contain, and this is a walk-in. Just way too easy, bad eyes by the defense, and New England is able to punish them with this tendency breaker. Just quickly on the point of bigger personnel groupings, against 11 personnel runs, Buffalo basically gives up 0 EP per play, although it massively spikes when they put a 6 DB on the field, where a lot of the explosive runs have come from, compared to the usual nickel sets. Where it becomes interesting is 12 personnel, 13 and 21 runs they faced a total of 50 times, and it's still the worst run D in the league in terms of expected points, but only just. Against two tight ends specifically, they're 2.5 times as bad as any other team, and here we have to inspect how they match those looks. Of those 73 carries listed here, 31 have come against space, which the Bills have a 29% success rate against, and a negative 0.27 EPA per play, which will both easily be the best in the league on a larger sample size. And part of that I'm sure is short yardage stuff and late game situations when playing from behind. On the 42 occasions they've remained in the preferred nickel sets, a 54.5% success rate, and a whopping 0.62 EP per play positively, which would be 6 times as bad as the league's worst unit in that metric. Let's now move on to week 6 at Atlanta. The second major point of worry about this unit, when the Falcons racked up 210 yards and a pair of touchdowns on the ground across 32 carries. Again, they went quite the opposite way, as they chose most of the spread out the opposing defense, even though they theoretically majored in 12 personnel, but with how much Kyle Pitts was detached from the line, you can also treat him like a big extra receiver, and they would hit weak side runs that were able to involve a defensive back in the run fit. All 3 of the runs of 20 plus yards came in that fashion. Those are the 3 I'll be showing you here, as it otherwise was also a steady drumbeat with 11 of the Falcons' 20 running back carries going for at least 5 yards. And what I'll add here in terms of expected points added from those two tight end sets, when the Bills match with base, they actually created a negative outcome on average, about middle of the pack if you compare it to the rest of the league. When they stayed in nickel, a positive 0.484 EPA per rush, which is about double of your typical MVP candidate at quarterback every time that guy drops back. The first touchdown comes when Atlanta is in 21 pony personnel, with Bijan Robinson offset way off to the quarterback's left side, and he's going to go behind Michael Penix Jr. as a fast threat to the flats, occupying the backside in case he throws a bubble screen that way, while they run inside zone to the weak side, and Tyler Algier goes 21 yards to the house, running over the safety in the process. Very simple play design, but the detail to pay attention to here, the Bills have a check motion to bump out number 8, which leaves Dorian Williams 42, and the safety Cole Bishop as the two de facto linebackers inside due to the motion, and as we've seen already in a balanced look, the Bills will have the D-line shifted towards the far side of the field. Left tackle takes care of the end, quick combo on the shade up to number 24, right tackle scoops up the free technique with a little help hand by his guard, who works up to 42, they get a head-on-head across the board, Algier can hit this at full throttle, actually makes a decision to run over the deep safety here and scores standing up, setting the tone for the rest of the day. Now it's Bijan time. Here, as I said already, theoretically 12 personnel, with Pitts detached in a bunch to the right, quick out motion by the actual Y to fake a now screen that way, and again we're hitting a run to the weak side for it, and again we're hitting that zone run to the weak side for a 22-yard gain. Bijan, of course, crosses over the safety and turns forward for several extra yards. But here's a nice lane yet again, as Buffalo thinks they can handle this with nickel still, as this time number 9 walks down, Bernard bumps out with the motion, and they're doing the exact same thing, where we have a guard with a head of steam working up on a key block against the safety. His partner or victim in crown the back, and as you'll see in a second, over pursues this, Bijan puts him on a poster, and Atlanta is back in the red zone, which would set up another touchdown. And then on the very next play from scrimmage, following an offside penalty, Bijan goes 81 yards on what? You guessed it, weak side zone, with a screen fake into the bunch at the bottom, which takes his 3 defenders out of the picture. Bijan knives through untouched. Another bad angle by Bishop from the high post. Great block by the boundary receiver out here to allow his teammates to get out to the sideline. He's gonna pull his legs out of this loose wrap and takes it 81 yards to the crib. That's what makes out a special running back, that he can actually turn this into a touchdown. This is the worst one yet, because we already know that we can leave this backside at the end unblocked. Meaning we have a 5-on-5 to the front side, where this time Bernard already jumps down into the A-gap, making it even easier to reach block him, and the 3 or almost a 4-eye technique at Oliver here on the backside, now making sure that he turns his pads and gets down the line here. Nice job of stretching the front side here, with a good block by the right tackle. Guard and center right this shade into the safety behind it. Bijan cuts off the backs with a little hurdle, and it's night-night for the defense, as Bishop can't push him out of bounds, and Bijan once again goes the distance. Coming off Buffalo's bye week at Carolina, I was pretty worried about how the Bills would look like against one of the more well-designed run games in the league, and I do have one big Rico Dowdle carry to showcase here, but after my methodical 6-3 start, the Bills scored 34 straight points over the next 18 minutes of playing time, with Andy Dalton turning the ball over twice, and just looking non-functional throughout the afternoon. Again, here's Rico's 24-yarder on a 3rd and 5, where the Panthers started empty, but quickly bring the running back in, and attach this sort of loose bunch at the top. And they kind of catch Buffalo in more of a passing down look, mucking up both linebackers in the A-gaps to create the 6-man surface. Safety Cole Bishop moves down late, as they're probably playing cover 1, potentially with one of these linebackers dropping out at the snap. But now if Buffalo makes it through the line of scrimmage, there's number 37 back here as the only man left as a deep safety, who moves over towards his boundary receiver Terrell McMillan on the backside, since he's the biggest threat in that situation, but it ends up leaving him in a bad situation, and he's just able to drag down the runner at the end of it to avoid this being a touchdown. Let me draw up the play from the end zone view. The extra gap pre-snap would be between the tight end and the right tackle here, so the C gap, which is in part why Bishop steps down along with having man coverage against the tight end. But what this front also presents is a nice opportunity to basically just block down on everybody, or sort of zone block, and have the tight end slice across for the kick-up block onto the end the opposite way, so basically the split zone. The left tackle actually ends up hooking the 4-eye technique here on his inside shoulder since he's laid off the ball. Rico sees number 24 hauling ass to trail the tight end that he'd be responsible for in man coverage. So the running back bends off him, sees a crease develop the other way, bursts through, and nearly takes this one to the house. The Chiefs aren't a particularly strong running team, but they still posted a 50% rushing success rate against Buffalo, and it took an even better day on the ground for their offense to combat that and win the game. KC just doesn't have the explosiveness among the ball carriers to rip off any big plays, unless they get rookie Rashard Smith into space, or use one of those wide receivers on some kind of sweep. But here's another bad snap for the defense that would turn into a big yardage if it wasn't Kareem Hunt lacking that extra gear. 13 personnel for the Chiefs, all 3 tight ends to the offense's right side initially. They motion one of them over, and the Bills counter again with nickel personnel. And once again it's a pretty simple split zone to the right, which pops for a 13-yard gain, where the back doesn't get touched for the first 10 or so as he churns through the tackle by his corner. Let's look at the defense here, as Buffalo has the D tackles once again in that 31 alignment towards the strong side. Nickel Cam Lewis trails the motion by Kelsey to create that 4-3 front, with the safety Jordan Poyer already kind of lurking down here. Again, you'll have number 83 sifting across for the backs at the end, while Travis Kelsey to that side peels off with Mahomes faking that boot action as if they had the option to throw this out here to the flats. What that does is occupy the backside, including the Mike backer, head up over the center here, yet not moving an inch basically. The right tackle, due to his alignment, has an easier drive block sort of on Joey Bosa, especially with that guy shooting up the field. To create that lane inside of him, number 85 works up to the safety, and we're just rolling here. Again, watch how slow that second level is, kind of moving with the tight end here initially, and then getting caught inside here as they work up to the second level, and now you have a corner being forced to tackle this 230-pound back before his friends join the party. Which brings us to this past Sunday at Miami, compared to week 3 when the Dolphins ran the ball 14 times out of 11 personnel and 11 more times out of 21, so basically whether they put Alec Ingold on the field or not. Mike McDaniel opened up the playbook for the rematch, 7 runs out of 11, 3 out of 12, 6 out of 20, 3 out of 21, 4 out of 22, and 6 more with an extra offensive lineman on the field, so already it's just a lot more to process, and decisions for the Bills coaching staff, which they failed to make the right ones. They just stuck a nickel for 27 of 32 runs on the day, with 3 in base and 2 in dime. On those, the success rate wasn't horrible, but the averaged .33 EPA per play, which again is more than 3 times as bad as the league's worst run defense currently. Miami's very first run of the day actually came out of 22 personnel, with 2 tailbacks, Jalen Wright in the backfield and Devon Achane as the offset wide receiver to the right in a condensed split, who they'll hand the ball to on a fly sweep to stretch Buffalo's defense horizontally on a 6-yard gain. And they got Wright going a couple of times from those looks, or having Achane in the backfield with him to fake that sweep action or screen the opposite way, and you saw him stiff-arm defensive linemen to the ground, who he caught on an angle off those, as he gains 15 yards here with a violent finish. They did run plenty of 2-back sets with fullback Alec Ingold as well though, who basically functions as a tight end a lot of the times. They actually hand him the ball here early on a little fullback dive across his offset alignment in the I formation, and he gets an easy 6 yards on 3rd and 1. Generally, they often either operate out of 21 or with a 6th lineman on the field instead of an actual tight end. On this next one, they put Ingold in motion as if they're about to run to the strong side, yet he winds back for a lead inside zone to the right. They get a hat on a hat, and Achane just gets dragged down for a 7-yard gain. And they weaponized all of their players along the front as potential pullers, running some variation of CT power counter, where they bring center Aaron Brewer and left tackle Patrick Paul across the formation to lead the way for Achane once again. And you can really see the mobility of those guys in an Achane making the most of it. Yet if he wasn't the speed threat and gadget player, it was Malik Washington drawing eyes lining up in the backfield a handful of times, or here on his orbit motion, and with all that pre-snap movement, it led to Buffalo's DBs having to involve themselves in the run fit, and even when they had a solid shot at Achane, the Dolphins running back won the battle routinely, as he set a new personal record, 11 missed tackles forced on the day. And what that rushing success for Miami also did was force Buffalo to crowd the line of scrimmage, even if they got stuck in nickel personnel, but you'd have two DBs on the second level, or catch corners with the eyes inside, and then it created those easy looks off play action behind those guys, like here on this Jalen Waddle touchdown, or they got completely out leveraged as that apex defender had to shuffle inside with the run fake, and now you have tight end Greg Dulcich slicing across the formation into the flats wide open with a ton of green grass in front of him off a simple bootleg for a 22-yard chunk. This was one of my favorite runs of the day because of how beautifully it plays off the look they presented earlier. Extra alignment to the right side, angled motions into that offset alignment to the left, before they bring him back into a more traditional I formation set, and everything looks like it'll be lead zone once again, only this time he actually sifts back across to the backs at the end, and they open up a pretty massive lane for Achane to work with, gaining an easy 13 yards. Watch it again from the end zone view and how this affects everyone in the box, not trying to get out leveraged by those blocks, linebackers over pursuing, and number 64 is allowed to climb to the second level thanks to this, where he's trying to put hands on Cam Lewis as a de facto backside linebacker, which you can probably imagine isn't gonna go too well. Looking at the construction of this Bills front, as we've already talked about, they want to attack upfield and disrupt plays early, but other than Daquan Jones to some degree, nobody's able to hold the ground consistently against those simple down blocks and combos up to backers. That's why they got plenty of run stuffs or TFLs throughout the day, but they also allowed about an even number of 10+ yard carries, and part of it was the tendency to blindly shoot up the field, yet getting trapped or creating extra gaps and kickouts against those guys, as well as getting ridden off track when slanting across the face of linemen. You saw it on the two long fourth quarter touchdowns by Achane, which both came from 12 personnel, something McDaniel reserved for late in the game, as they only ran it out of that set once otherwise, but they were able to pop big time on these two. I believe this is supposed to be some variation of Y or F lead, as the right side of the O-line blocks down, and the tight end from the opposite side is responsible for the kickouts. Number 87 you see in a second actually slips, yet it doesn't matter, as Achane makes one man miss, and then goes 59 yards to the house, thanks to a bad angle from the single high safety. Tell me where you've had that before. You see here from the end zone view that the running back ultimately ends up in the backside A-gap, currently occupied by the shade nose, who's gonna peek the other way off this combo, and he's met up by the nickel Cam Lewis, who gets a clean shot on him shuffling inside, but whiffs on a tackle. And then maybe the biggest issue with this Bills defense shows up, their safeties, and in particular the angles and tackling as that third lay of the run D, as Jordan Poyer can't trip up Achane as he's diving for that guy's ankles, and he's off to the races. Speed kills, man. And then on 3rd and 8, Miami comes out in one of these funky backfield sets they've shown throughout the day. Initially 2 tight ends flying to Tua's left, they bring Achane behind the quarterback, and one of these tight ends up to the line of scrimmage for this pin and pull toss play to the left, where the fastest running back in the league can go 35 yards untouched to the end zone, once again making that defense look bad in pursuit. Let's drop this one final play for you guys here. So as we watch the look change pre-snap, you're gonna end up with this tight end up here. He's gonna pin the D-end inside, who's already answered to get upfield, allowing Paul at left tackle and Dulcich from the backfield to pull out to the corner. Brewer from the center spot, with Terrell Bernard head up over him, but afraid of some kind of counteraction once more, is late to trail the play, so he's able to cross his face and wall him off inside, with those pullers being able to escort these 3 DBs out wide and create a nice lane to cut up inside them, which wide receiver Cedric Wilson gets a great foot on Jordan Poyer trying to fill the alley, so that Achane is just looking over either shoulder of his as he does the rest of the defense in pursuit. So it's not like the Dolphins necessarily got into I formation and ran and dropped the A-gap every other play to take it to them, but the combination of clever run play designs, using all of the bodies on the move as blockers, taking advantage of Buffalo's tendencies, and H.N. in particular just making that one-man miss that they put in conflict consistently. That's how you finish the day with 197 yards and a couple of scores on the ground across 32 carries. I don't exactly know where the Bills go from here. They may not have the most dynamic group of receiving options, but this is still the reigning MVP at the helm. They can beef up themselves and bludgeon teams on the ground, but this defense, whenever it faces a potent rushing attack, and they can't get a couple of early turnovers to dictate game script, just has no shot of slowing down opponents on the ground. I do believe they need to get out of some of these nickel and dime looks when opponents put big bodies on the field, something they see in practice every day. They won't get big on the interior right now, but putting yourselves in run fits that force the Bs to fill, and then the rest of that unit having to compensate for it, is a recipe for disaster. Then those safeties need to work on different variations of run shuffle run drills in practice as much as they can. Maybe you can slowly get 5th round pick Jordan Hancock on the field more, because he at least at Ohio State showed that he's solid with his angles from depth and tackling, because every time a run does break through the second level, I feel like a house call is coming. They need to figure this out if they finally want to get to the promised land.